But you can see on screen that tonight I'm driving through the Old Town neighborhood of Chicago, or near, an area which used to be called Little Hell. From Division down to Chicago Avenue area, and then from the river over to Sedgwick, somewhere near those locations. And 150 years ago, people crossed the North Branch just to avoid this grid. Dirt roads turned to black rivers when it rained. The gasworks on Goose Island lit the sky like open wounds. Kids fought with broken bottles. Women walked into saloons and were carried out under wagons. Now the streets are clean, the pavement smooth. The rent signs read numbers that don't even feel real, they're so expensive. People smile as they walk past coffee shops that used to be shanties. Now there was a plant there that used to supply gasoline to people for lights. It was People's Gas had a building on the corner of Halston and West Washington Street in Chicago. On the first floor of the office, was the People's Gas counting their money. And on the second floor was the National Bank's office, the home of the National Bank's office, which they were there rent-free, and the authorities troubled them for it. You can see a bunch of newspaper articles of them talking shit to each other. The authorities always cared for who paid for what, you know. They always wanted some money, right? Everybody wanted somebody else's money. Everybody always wanted to put their hands into someone else's pockets. But that building, the brick, squat, 2-story, wasn't the Hellfire plant. It was where widows in black shawls lined up at noon to drop pennies in a slot, while upstairs bankers in cufflinks counted dividends and sipped coffee that never went cold. Gas downstairs, money upstairs, rent-free. This is the same week that Elma Williams died, which we'll mention more about her in a minute. A clerk on the first floor found a coin with a hole in it, nickel-sized. But when he bit it, it was lead. It was somebody's joke, somebody's revenge. He tossed it in the drawer. The next morning it was gone. No one checked. That's how things worked on Halston Street. You don't notice the leak until the houses explode. Now, the Gas, Light, and Coke Company was founded in 1849. They began delivering gas to people in 1862. It would be a couple decades before electrical lights began to spread throughout the Chicagoland area in the 1900s, the early 1900s. The company sold nearly 20,000 gas stoves by the year 1898. I found it in a newspaper article. The word Coke referred to a type of fuel coke used to make gas for home heating. Coca-Cola is not the same as this fuel coke, so don't try to start a fire with Coca-Cola. It'll clean your rust, though. At the corner of Crosby and Hobby Streets in Chicago was the gas house. They would pour water from the river onto this coke field, and then add more coal and then repeat the process, which lit up the night skies. The neighborhood was lit up by the fire that lit up the smoke behind it. And some have said that this phenomenon gave the neighborhood the nickname Little Hell. Sometime after the Chicago fire until the early 20th century. And others may have referred to the neighborhood as Little Hell because of its moral conditions. A lot of the Chicago fire refugees lived in the neighborhood. And so did the gangsters that said, hey, this is a cool neighborhood to get together and cause some noise. The corner of Oak Street and Cleveland Avenue, which was called Milton Street back then, has said to have been called Death's Corner due to the countless murders that happened there throughout the years. This is not to be mistaken for the article of a man who was near death there due to the extreme summer heat on the date of June 29th in the year 1890. In the year 1890, that summer day reached over 100 degrees or more, just in the shade, they said. It had been the hottest that it had been in 30 years at that time. So they estimated that it hadn't gotten over 100 degrees since the year 1860. Is that global warming yet? Joliet, Illinois reported 110 degrees at the time. William Haidt, a German beer peddler, was overcome by the heat at the corner of Oak and Milton in the Little Hell neighborhood. 14 people died of sunstroke the year before that, out of 386 various other deaths, either due to age, sickness, crime, bad food, or water, or whatever else. People were dying from the sun. And there was a cop that was shot at the corner of Chicago and Milton Avenue on July 5th in the year 1891. The cop, Officer Barkle, he didn't die, but he was shot. And he was back on duty sometime after that. Cops hated patrolling the Little Hell neighborhood of Chicago. Crime was rampant. People were robbed on highways that made their way near the hood. Some of the most notorious gang members made their headquarters in that neighborhood in the 1880s and 90s. And Officer Barkle was from the east side of Chicago, but was a cop whose goal was to clean the neighborhood of the major criminals. Just after midnight, Officer Barkle left the station on foot, headed west on Chicago Avenue to go north on Milton to Oak Street. He turned back towards Chicago Avenue and made his way to an alley that looked like a suspicious spot to investigate thugs and crime. He barely made it far into the alley when he noticed two thugs trying to break into the back window of Halberg's Saloon, which was on 16th and Milton Avenue. One man was standing on top of a beer keg, the other was on lookout. And when they noticed the cop, they started running. The cop chased after them. The thieves turned around and shot the cop in his chest. Then a doctor came quickly by train and extracted the bullet from the arm, from his chest that was near his arm, and the cop survived the Little Hell neighborhood incident. Officer Barkle had already had a bullet in his leg from an incident that happened a year earlier near the Sheffield Avenue station locality. And after Officer Barkle was shot, Officer Reddy found the two young 19-year-old criminals hiding underneath a sidewalk with some other stolen goods, including a sewing machine. They were arrested and put in jail without being booked. Their names were William Gates and John Burritts. The police knew of these young men. They were notorious. They liked to cause trouble in the neighborhood. They were said to be tough characters. Lieutenant Barkle, the man they shot, was also known to be a tough and very brave person. But school children and cops weren't the only victims in the neighborhood. There was a woman named Elma Williams, sometimes known as Elma Williams. She was married to a couple different people, and people from around town knew her at different points of her life and knew her by different last names. Elma Williams was born in 1864 on a hardscrabble farm outside Rockford, Illinois. She was the third of 7 children who learned early that hunger was a louder teacher than any schoolmarm. At 16, she could shoe a horse faster than her brothers, and when the railroad pushed through in 81, she followed the iron east to Chicago with nothing but a carpet bag and a hammer her father swore was lucky. But the rain still remembers. She met Daniel Whitberg in the yards. He was a Swede with shoulders like bridge beams and a laugh that rattled tin roofs. They married in 85, no ring, just borrowed Bible and a priest who smelled like kerosene. For 14 years they lived above the forge on Larrabee. 2 rooms, soot in every crack, the clang of iron, their lullaby. Daniel made good money. Alma kept the books, mended sails for the river captains, and quietly paid the rent on 3 other widows' shanties when the landlords came sniffing. In '98, the influenza took Daniel in 3 days. Alma found him slumped over an anvil, hammer still in hand, the fire gone cold. She buried him at Graceland with the lucky hammer across his chest. The forge was sold for taxes. She kept the books, the hammer's twin, and a ledger full of IOUs from men who now crossed the street when they saw her coming. By 1902, Elma was 38, still strong, still quick with numbers. She wore black every day, but not for the mourning, but because dye was cheap and hid the coal dust that fluttered through the air onto her clothes. She lived in a rear tenement of Hobby Street. It was 2 blocks from the river. Made her living collecting small debts, nickels and dimes owed to the dead. Patrick Tobin owed her $23 from a horse race bet in 1899. Michael Lynch owed her $18 for a coat she patched twice, on the 3rd time after he tore it in a brawl. Both men worked in the lumber schooners that nosed up to Goose Island every spring. Both drank at O'Malley's pub that was off the river there. Both had seen Alma's eyes when she reminded them the interest that was running. At 8 a.m. on April 25th, 1902, Alma kisses the crucifix at her throat, pockets the ledger, and walks to the river. She has a plan. Collect from Tobin and Lynch before the boat coast off for Milwaukee. At 10 a.m., she finds Mary B. tied at Larrabee. Only Tobin and Lynch are aboard, nursing hangovers and a single jug of beer. The deck is empty of lumber. Perfect. No foreman to interrupt. Alma steps aboard without asking. Morning, boys. Time to square. Tobin squints, sun in his eyes. Thought the widow forgot. I forget nothing, Alma says, tapping the ledger. 23 from you, 18 from Mickey. Cash, or I walk to the captain. Lynch laughs. But it's thin. Captains in Milwaukee love. Then I wait, she says, and sits on a crate like she owns it. About 11:30 in the morning till about 3 o'clock, the jug makes rounds. Alma sips once, warm, sour, but it keeps her throat from drying while she watches the men sweat. They send Lynch ashore twice for fresh beer. Each time he returns quieter. Tobin's knuckles whiten around the jug handle. At 3 o'clock, the sky's bruises purple. The Mary B. won't sail till morning. Tobin mutters something about one last round at O'Malley's. Alma stands. Fine. But the debt walks with me. They get to O'Malley's around 4:15 p.m. The saloon is a furnace of pipe smoke and sawdust. John Taft pours without looking up. He knows Elma. He knows the ledger. He knows better than to refuse her corner table. Tobin and Lynch are joined by 2 river rats Elma doesn't recognize. Big men, dock-stained, only half in the bag. They buy rounds like water. Elma nurses a single whiskey, eyes on the clock. 5:30 p.m. Tobin leans in, breath hot. We ain't got it, Elma. Not tonight. Then you'll have it tomorrow, she says. Or the captain hears. Lynch slams the table. Captain's my cousin. You happy? Elma smiles, small and sharp. Then your cousin will love the story of how you welch on widows. The strangers laugh. Tobin's face goes scarlet. He grabs her wrist hard. Outside, he hisses. We'll settle this proper. About 5:30 p.m. in the alley. The rain starts as they spill out the back door. 5 bodies in the narrow cut between O'Malley's and the wagon yard. The strangers follow for sport. Elma's boots slip on wet cobbles. Tobin shoves her against the brick. Ledger? Now. Or we take it. Elma twists free. Hammer handle flashing from her coat. Daniel's twist sworn smooth. Touch me and I'll scream bloody murder. Lynch lunges. The hammer catches its cheek. Cracked like green wood. He staggers, blood mixing with rain. One stranger grabs Elma from behind, pinning her arms. Tobin rips the ledger, pages fluttering like white moss. She bites the stranger's hand. He curses, releases. Elma swings again, connects with Tobin's temple. He drops to a knee, stunned. The second stranger, bigger, drunker, backhands her. The blow lifts her off her feet. She lands hard, skull-kissing cobblestone. A soft, wet sound. Silence, except rain. 6:05 p.m. Tobin touches his head. Blood, but he's breathing. Lynch is on his knees, cradling his face. The strangers stare at Elma, unmoving, eyes open to the sky. Christ, one whispers. She's gone. A hay wagon waits in the yard, bound for stables at dawn. They lift her, light as kindling, and slide her beneath the axle. The ledger's pages soak red, then black. Tobin wipes his hands on his coat. Drunk fall. Happens. The Lynch nods, numb. The strangers melt into the rain. Charles Murphy, rag picker, lantern swinging, finds the wagon. Sees the boot first, then the skirt. He runs for the beat cop. By midnight, Inspector Campbell is there. Coat collar up, eyes already counting lies. Tobin and Lynch are arrested by dawn. The strangers vanish. One to the rails, one to the river. Taft closes the saloon early, scrubs blood from the floor with lye that never quite takes a stain. Elma's body lies in the morgue, hammer still in her pocket. Daniel's twin, useless now. The coroner writes, internal hemorrhage, blunt force. The papers scream murder, then forget by Tuesday. Years later, a boy with no name, maybe the same one who watched from the gasworks fence, will dive a Sears truck past a stop. He'll flinch at hay wagons, though he won't know why. And on nights when the rain hit Blackhawk just right, the pavement remembers the shape of a woman who carried a hammer and a ledger and refused to forget a debt. Now, it wasn't just criminals and crazy people attacking people. There were other accidents that happened in the area as well. In the year 1896, there was a leak in a gas main at the corner of Peoria and West Taylor Street in Chicago. There was a young man named Johnny Arado who was playing with his friends in the street. Johnny found a half-smoked cigarette near the leaky pipe. He took out a match to light the cigarette, which ignited the gas leak, sending flames to blow as high as the tallest buildings in the area. Johnny survived, although all of his hair and his eyebrow hair were singed off. He screamed very loud, which terrified people close enough to hear for a while, and he started running. He was then seen running away from the fire with his friends that followed closely behind, screaming. Some residents described the fire as more amazing than the 4th of July shows that they had seen during the late 1800s in Chicago. Firemen came to put out the fire, but they only made it worse, which they then shoveled dirt onto the flames, which eventually diminished the blaze to smoke. The trolley cars were all at a halt on that street at the time. When it was safe to pass, the conductor alarmed all the passengers to hold their breath from the smell of the fumes that took people's breath away. Officials warned the conductor not to make sparks from the overhead wires, since it may cause another fire to come. The smell was so bad that people couldn't near the hole past the sidewalk. Women who watched from their windows were in awe of the catastrophe. Black soot entered through their windows and blanketed everything, even the silverware. Some residents of the area said that the hole in the ground had been there for a couple days, giving off an awful stench, which is a reason for the kids' curiosity in the area. The trolley conductors would sometimes be heard from the trolleys driving by afterwards saying, "Look out for the gas well. You better hold your breath." Yeah, so these are some interesting things that happened in the Little Hell neighborhood of Chicago in the 1800s and early 1900s. There was a big gang in the area called the Market Street Gang. Many decades. They had gangs and prostitutes, brothels off the river that sat in between delis and saloons. But besides the gang thugs of the historical neighborhood, there was a school built there by Eli Bates, who also ran a boarding house on Elm Street. They called it a social settlement that had been there in the area of Little Hell since the year 1876. It was the only settlement in that part of the city. And they were going to build a playground for kids on the corner of Elm and Orleans Street, which by 1900 housed an institution for unlucky women called the House of Good Shepherd. The religious organization of the facility was ran by corrupt people who gave the facility a bad name, which the justification and morals of the time excused. Prostitutes, criminal women, orphans, drunks, and whatever other excuses they could use to house these women in goals to correct them morally. They would then demand federal money, greedy and seemingly helpless as any organizations do, and then start their own business on top of that. They would collect laundry from several locations around the area and turn the resident women into slaves to clean the clothes of the neighborhood and hotels and stuff like that. They would have short little children stand on boxes, iron clothes on a rack. They would punish women very badly for disobeying the rules. Most of the facilities were made of European descent women. There also existed some facilities that were black-only women, and then some mixed. But Little Hell had one of these facilities there. And here's an article from 1902, the Tribune, September 23. If the Reverend Dr. John Boyd, his church votes to start a social settlement in the district of Chicago that is bounded by North Avenue, Division, Larrabee, and Halsted Streets, the good people will find that the old name of Little Hell is a misnomer. The days of lawless Market Street Gang have passed into history, and today the district comparatively is law-abiding. However, the need of settlement work is apparent on all sides, for the territory is densely populated, and its sanitary condition is bad. Then, too, as in all congested areas, there is a hoodlum element that needs diversion, and education to repress its lawless tendencies and develop its talent goodness. And see, they said that the gang started moving out for one reason or another, maybe because of the police, and the majority of the crime, people had said, were the children, were bad kids that would go around and break windows. There was an incident somewhere in the early 1900s when kids would stand outside of a church and throw snowballs at all the people and hitting women in the face and stuff like that. And then the police would come and then they would throw snowballs at the police. It was pretty rough, pretty wild. But there was other reports from other people about the neighborhood children that said that the children were very nice and very respectful at other points, where if they were left in classrooms, they would be in their class studying and they wouldn't cause any harm. And then the guy that drove the trolley, he said that the kids that got on the trolley bus, he said the kids were very respectful, very nice, and he never had a problem with them. So we got different perspectives. But the Little Hell neighborhood is now a bunch of probably very expensive condos and apartments there. It is nothing like it was 150 years ago right now. So that's why I want to call this episode Little Hell and not Old Town or something like that of modern day happenings. Because what if I meet a pretty girl with lipstick on and I interview her, and then she goes to look at her interview on YouTube and finds that I called her video Little Hell? She'd probably be pissed off and get a search party out to have me killed. So anyways, I think that was interesting enough for the history of that neighborhood. So far, there's a lot more to it. We'll get to it. But that's it for this. For right now. Adios.